What's ahead? Right, Jonathan Liss. Yes, how did you guess? Jonathan Liss, political commentator, and Gawain Towler, Westminster comms veteran, joined me this morning. Jonathan Liss, so Betty says you will be an excellent minister and a reformed Tory.
I thought she was talking about you. I thought, what does that...
No, you!
I know, I was thinking, how could that possibly be?
Do you remember at the beginning where I said keep your enemies close?
Well, I suppose so. That's a little bit too close to comfort, really.
He's Betty.
I'm not Betty.
You can call me Betty. I'll call him out.
We all know who you are, but Gawain, you and I go back a long way. Do you just want to explain your background?
For 20 years, I've been speaking on behalf and working with the tribe that is made up of those people who have voted for parties led by Nigel Farage. This is how I describe it. So UKIP, then the Brexit Party, then Reform. I remembered this week, because I was fired last week, I remembered this week that I had lunch with somebody who pointed out that he'd already fired me twice. Oh. So that was the third time I've been fired by the tribe.
Well, it's all right, because he'll be re-employed when Farage starts his next party.
I have no idea what happens next. No, I'm too old now.
So we were talking about, I mean, you and I go back a long way because obviously I've been involved for a long time. We were talking about other characters within the party. Ben Habib said that Reform could be the next party of government. Do you see that?
I think downhill following wind with the government carrying on like this and the Tory party not reinsustentating itself, it's not impossible, but it's not the most likely thing in the world. Party of government, now that is far more likely.
I mean, a coalition, you mean?
Yeah. I would think going forward, party of government. Yes, I think that's a completely attainable objective. The party of government. A much bigger
well, you mentioned, I mean, it is theirs to lose, and you mentioned all these policies. I mean, we were reading this morning about 1 in 4 over 80s losing their winter fuel allowance. That seems like a terrible policy to me. We were talking about that. Yeah. The fact is the impact on the health service will be enormous, and elderly people do not do well in the cold. There's this big story, staff to get more rights from the first day at work. This is the front page of the Times this morning. But the one thing that I did read this morning, which is about the cut to foreign aid. This is Rachel Reeves' plan to cut almost £2 billion from the foreign aid budget, has sparked a cabinet backlash. David Lammy very unhappy about all of this. I think that will go down quite well across the country.
Yes, I mean, I suppose it's interesting that you and I will approach this from opposite sides, if you see what I mean. You'll be on sort of the government side on this. Yeah, look, the 0.7% of GDP was the baseline for a very long time after David Cameron. I always thought that was about right. I opposed it when they moved it down to 0.5. And I think that, you know, the last government did two really bad things on foreign aid. DFID was a very, very well-respected department. It had respect around the world. It was seen as one of the things that the UK really did well. It was something that sort of Brexiters and Remainers sort of advertised as being one of the great strengths of Britain in many ways. You can answer in a second.
I don't recall that. I really don't recall that, but okay.
Well, like, look, some people said, you know, a lot of Brexiters were saying that Britain does all these things really well and will continue to do all these things really well, even if we leave the European Union, and that actually stayed the case. And then obviously, so Johnson folded it into the Foreign Office, and then obviously they cut it down to 0.5%. So I think that was a mistake. Obviously, Reeves has been affected by Treasury brain, which is a shame. This idea that you count the pennies of everything and maybe the value of less. And we have to be thinking...
Well, she's made up a £22 billion hole anyway, which there is no evidence for.
Aren't they putting that £22 billion into a big hole under the North Sea?
Yes, that's right.
I'm not sure it's going one to the other quite so neatly.
Just let's be clear on this. The fact is that actually part of that is the illegal immigrants in this country. We're paying £8 million a day into that. I think many people around the country will be thinking, actually, charity begins at home. We need to actually spend money in this country, making sure that actually pensioners don't freeze to death. And that's why I said this will be welcomed.
I can see it being welcomed, but I've always... yes, it will be welcomed, there's no doubt, because that feeling of looking after our own first it starts in the family, spreads to friends, spreads to your locality, spreads to your nation, and then when you can... But I don't think many people have the ability to love the whole world. We have concentric circles of care. And when it comes to British taxpayers' money, then most British taxpayers would like to see it spent on people who are in this country.
Especially with the looming budget, where we're told that we're going to have to tighten our bootstraps.
And especially as that figure is actually higher than it is, because they've just given $11 billion to Africa for climate change. That's foreign aid. I mean, that's foreign aid. So that's an extra $11 billion on it.
Gawain.
I mean,
Jonathan.
Well, look, I think it's important. I don't think it's either or with any of this. It's really important that we should obviously be looking after our own people. Everyone agrees with that. But there's a moral case for helping the poorest people in the world, and there's also a political case as well, because Britain is not sort of completely isolated, and when you help people around the world, that is also in your strategic interest as well, depending on where they are. Now, I would agree that, and I've had this conversation on other programmes as well, that some of the projects that the UK government funds could probably be looked at. I'm not saying that the
interpretive dance in Addis Ababa.
Well,
that's going to carry on.
Well, look, I think culture is really important, and that there's nothing wrong with the British government funding different projects. But if you are trying to streamline things, there's nothing wrong with looking at where you can add the most value. That's fine. But I do think that there could be more money for sure.
Surely the best way to, and if we're looking at trying to improve the lot of the people in the parts of the world that are in their worst state, then having a far greater level of free trade and fewer regulations on that level gives them more chance of improving their economy so they can stay at home. We know that most people, if they have the choice, financially, economically, socially and militarily, for living in their own homeland, people prefer it. You go to the most desolate places and the people who come from there think it's the most beautiful place in the world. And we all feel that way about our home.
Well, yeah, you can prove that by the fact that the majority of the world in sort of, poorer places are not currently migrating unless they're being forced to by war or whatever. But at the same time, migration has been around for literally as long as human history.
True, but it's not been powered by international air travel. It's not been powered by the speed and ability and cheapness of travelling from A to B. In the past, it wasn't easy to jump on a caravel and travel halfway
and also
across
with
the
the
world.
rise of social media and the rise of television, and the fact is that you can it's very immediate. You can see
what it looks like on the other side.
Let's just pause there for the moment. Jonathan Liss, Gawain Towler will be back after this break. Welcome back. We're in the middle of our head-to-head with Jonathan Liss, political commentator, Gawain Towler, Westminster Comms veteran, Dr. Rennie Undercover.
I'm still here.
Yeah, you missed the veteran bit. Anyway, let's talk about terrible ideas from the Labour government. That's right. The UK has announced it's giving up sovereignty of a remote but strategically important cluster of islands. We talked about this morning, the Chagos Islands. And Boris Johnson said this is a terrible idea. He then said, well, let's have a look where Mauritius is, shall we? And let's look at the Chagos Islands. Gawain, this strikes me as a terrible thing to have done. It's politically naive. It's a strategic base. Meanwhile, we're going to pay for the benefit of doing this. The US is not going to pay a penny.
It's also, I would say, it is immoral in that to have a discussion, it would be like the UK talking to France about the Isle of Wight being given to the French without mentioning it to anybody who lives in Cowes. It is utterly wrong. We behaved disgracefully in the 1960s, 1965, when we stripped them of their land and shipped them off to the Seychelles and Mauritius. And we are doing it again. And one would have thought this liberal, this progressive Labour Party would actually bother to speak to the people who are affected most, the people of those islands. I met Maxwell Laverne from the Chagosian Voices last night, and I was deeply impressed with him as a man, but I cannot imagine how it feels.
What does he say about it?
He says we need to be informed and discussed. We need to be involved in the discussion. How can you talk about our islands without us being involved? Yes. He also says he has no interest, though he was born on Mauritius himself. He's a post-65 born. He has no interest in the Mauritians taking control. You know that the Mauritians passed a piece of legislation a few years back that said if you oppose Mauritian ownership of the Chagos, then you get 10 years in jail.
What is their claim
now, if
to
you
it?
are,
What is their claim?
I think it was administered under the same colony.
Yes, it was British Indian Ocean Territory, BIOT. And so Seychelles, Mauritius and the Diego Garcia.
So not much.
I think that when Britain, when Mauritius got independence, that was sort of the trade-off, that Britain would keep this strategic. And then obviously at the same time, Britain then sort of forcibly expelled the population.
But the real concern here is about the fact that Mauritius is close to China, and giving away this strategically important archipelago, which Rennie and I talked about earlier. Isn't that a concern?
It is a concern, but it's not the real concern.
I don't think that this is actually a relevant point of it, because the agreement specifies that the US-UK military military base is going to be in the same.
But we're
hands.
paying until 2164, by the way.
Well, he knows what. David, if anyone's still alive by then, I think we'll probably be talking.
Have
about
you seen
different
leasehold reform? Leasehold reform changes things. I don't believe them, and what's more, because of that, and the Chinese thing is deeply important.
Why is
how idiotic! You don't think they're going to put spy stations on it?
Why has he done it?
Madness.
Why has he done it?
Well, the negotiations started obviously under the last government,
Indeed.
So Labour didn't initiate this.
No,
I think it's...
But they've expedited it.
Very fast.
And they did it in parliamentary recess.
Which goes against the rules that were previously set.
What do you mean?
There were rules in the Gina Miller case, actually, in which the Chagos Islands were involved, and it had to be discussed in Parliament.
But the treaty hasn't been ratified yet.
It hasn't. It hasn't.
So, I mean, they're allowed to negotiate outside. I mean, MPs aren't.
Let's just stick to that point. Why have they done it now? Why the sequencing of timing? And is there a chance the ratification would not go through?
No. There's no chance of anything not going through with the Labour majority. I don't think that people are particularly vexed about this. I think there's a really important question about the Chagos Islanders' role in it, and that is, that's a blight on all British governments dating back to the 60s and 70s. But it's, if you have a negotiation ongoing, the Labour government's obviously desperate for wins. So long as it's got its
Is it distraction, as Renee said earlier?
Well, I just wondered if it was look over here. We've had enough of everything else that's going on.
That has been mutilated.
That has been suggested, but actually, I just don't see anything. I don't see anything wrong per se with Britain sort of resolving a dispute with another country.
What's next? Gibraltar?
No. Now that's where I depart from the other side, because there is the one key difference is that you have a population living in those places who 99+% of them want to be British. So
you're talking about the Falklands
I have no ideological commitment to Britain keeping its remaining territories, or Spain or Argentina taking them, or whatever. What I care about is what the people there think, and that's where I agree with Gawain about the Chagos Islanders. But it's, in terms of Falklands, it's completely different.
What does this say?
I'm not sure it is as completely different as you say. It is notable that both the Chief Minister of the Gibraltar and the Governor of the Falklands had to rush out a message to their people saying, don't panic. You don't do that unless those people are now scared.
But they might be scared. That's why you should put out the message.
But they are scared. Why? Because the message this sends out from a government in its infancy to the world... And let's be honest, the Argentinian foreign minister has already picked up on it and started ramping up the pressure.
That doesn't make a difference, though.
It does, because the reason we're in this position in the Chagos is because the UN, that collection of democracies and decent people, passed motions in favour of Mauritius. That's why we're in that position. That's why
the international pressure was building on the United Kingdom.
And that's happening in Argentina, that's happening in Gibraltar.
And you are right to bring that up. Diana Mondino.
It does have an effect.
But Diana Mondino, who's the country's foreign minister, has said that, of course, the Malvinas will always be Argentinian. So there is then going to be... And I was in Argentina over the summer, and all the buses have... Malvinas will be Argentinian.
But it doesn't actually change anything. That's a fundamental point.
And it changes things for almost everybody apart from the Labour government.
It shows us the Labour government's thought process, doesn't it? That's what it shows, which could then be applied to Gibraltar, Argentina.
I honestly...
Doesn't it set a precedent?
No, it doesn't. No, it really doesn't. I think that, look, I absolutely take the point, and I make the point myself, that the Chagos Islanders should have been involved in this negotiation, but it is completely different. And with the Falklands, in particular, there is no indigenous population that existed on the Falklands.
There wasn't an indigenous population on the Chagos Islands.
That's a slightly different issue, isn't it? But those people were there for a couple of hundred years before they were expelled.
Let's pause if we can. We need to go to a break. After the break, I want to talk about private schools, our favourite topic. And we'll do all of that after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. Welcome back. This is Weekend Breakfast. This is Talk 847, Saturday, October the 5th. Lots of messages coming in. David, great show. Where was it? Oh, yes. Good morning, doctors. This is Dorothy, doctor. Dorothy says, has anyone said to your guest Gawain, he looks like Martin Fry from the 80s pop group ABC?
Is that the look of love?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very dashing.
Yeah, very dashing. By the way, I've got one for you.
McFly is the only person I can describe.
David and Renee, great show. I'm not normally a Jonathan List fan, but I am embarrassed to say I had a similar jumper as the one he's wearing. I thought it was in the 1980s.
I genuinely thought there was going to be something nice said.
I think that's quite nice for the comments we usually get.
You're evil. You are evil this morning. Let's talk. I want to go back to Labour's crazy policies. This is the headline in the Telegraph this morning. Labour VAT raid, which we've spoken about before, drives 10,000 pupils out of private schools. I know that this is a really hot issue for many people who struggle to send their kids to private schools. According to this, the number of students attending private schools fell by 1.7% year-on-year in September. They've said this is the equivalent of 10,000 fewer students. It's not, so they've extrapolated that. But essentially, the ISC, representing 1,400 independent schools, said that actually this will cost the Department for Education £92.8 million. I'm totally against this VAT rise on private schools. I think it's wrong. I think it is driven by ideology. I think it's particularly shameful. It's in the middle of a school year.
I agree with you. I think it is wrong. I think it is that. I think it was a bit of what was socialist red meat to throw to the Labour Party when you have the Rachel Reeves going, nothing can be done, nothing can be done, nothing can be done. Oh, here's private schools. Kill, die. And that seemed to me how it was being driven. I think that the amount of... I went to a minor private school. I hold my hands up. I loved it, by the way. Absolutely loved it. However, the amount of work done by that school in the community, in providing sports facilities and providing leisure facilities to other local schools is significant. This idea that you've got to lose their charitable status, you've got to hit things of this sort. Well, actually, the impact, there are schools nearby that have none of these facilities, and they're not going to get them, because when that school closes, it will be flogged off to the highest bidder, and though it is not a profit-making enterprise, at that point, the only people who will profit are the owners of that school, and that because when they sell it, when it closes, the land will be sold, and it will not be gifted to the local schools. These facilities will be gone, not just for those who go to those schools, but also for those who use them pretty much for free in the local community. And that's a massive problem.
You almost make it sound as though the government is forcibly closing down all
It's not forcibly closing down. It knows what the impact is.
Just looking at this, the schools that are most affected are those with fewer than 300 students. Yeah. They've got a 3% drop in pupils, 3 times the number of pupils leaving larger private schools. And we know that of those 554,000 pupils going to independent schools in the UK, it saves the country £4.5 billion. Why on earth would you do this when actually there aren't the places in the state system to take the kids that, if they do leave the independent sector, will not be able to have education? It makes no sense.
David, no one is saying that, well, very few people are saying that we should sort of ban private education.
No, indeed, but parents are going to be forced to make that choice. And may well move their kids out of the independent system.
All that this policy has been about is levelling the playing field. If
down.
To use the
levelling it down.
To allow basically just to say that this is not a charity, although obviously many private schools are charities, but to say that you're absolutely welcome to use the service, but you have to pay tax.
But you're already paying. You're paying for the state system already.
They're already paying your taxes for the state schools.
So don't forget that education is legally supposed to be VAT free.
It's a Brexit benefit.
It's a Brexit benefit,
isn't it?
Yes, the only way the government can do it is to do it.
You voted for it, Renee?
No, we voted.
It's a Brexit benefit what? That we can now remove VAT?
Because before you wouldn't have been allowed to.
That's a cheap shot, Jonathan.
Well, I'm sorry you voted for it. I'd have been a Remainer personally.
But we are still in the ECHR, so it could be legally challenged.
And I'm really pleased you mentioned that, because in fact private schools are drawing up plans to launch a legal challenge against it through the ECHR.
Most lawyers say that case doesn't stand a chance, but of course we should. Any case should be allowed to.
1,400 private schools ganging up to take it to the ECHR. That I want to see.
Well, I think that the people who want private schools to be abolished probably would want a lot of people who would support the private schools also want the ECHR abolished. So, good luck with the case. Have the case tested by all means.
There's two aspects that I think we've missed out here. One, just as military and health inflation is massive, education inflation is massive, the fees in private schools have been going up well over the rate of inflation for many years.
Yes. Yep.
This is a problem of their own making to a certain extent, and you've got to accept that. Whilst I'm opposed to this VAT change, you've got to accept that's it.
I agree.
So in the past, in those far-off days, those sepia-tinted days when I was at school, the people in my school were mostly the children of army soldiers, not officers, were mostly local farmers, local solicitors, local GPs, things of this sort. Those people have been driven out. We will have a private school sector, but it'll be mostly for Chinese children.
But that's already the case. And this is a really important point. 30 years ago, it was professionals.
That is not true.
Small schools,
because
if
you look at the smaller independent schools,
being hit.
for example, where I am in East Anglia, they are still the kids of farmers, of shopkeepers, of people who do multiple jobs to keep their kids in those private schools.
And this is going to be essentially a tax on aspiration, a tax on people's wish and desire to improve the lot of their children.
The aspiration is something that is shared by all parents. All parents all parents want the best of their children, and it's not just it's not the case that parents who send their kids.
How is doing this going to improve? You talk about levelling up. How is doing this going to improve the lot of a state secondary school or a state primary school? How is closing down these schools going to do anything to improve their lot?
As I say, the government is not closing them down. Parents are going to be very welcome to.
If you have more pupils leaving the independent sector and going into the state system, how is that improving the education of those kids in the state system? Because they haven't got the places.
Well, the government should obviously be funding the education system more.
But it can do that without screwing up the private sector.
But if you made the secondary schools that brilliant, then parents would make the choice to send their kids to state schools.
Well, that does happen. You have with a real problem in the state sector that sort of parents, you have great state schools, and so the wealthiest parents actually move near them.
So therefore you have
pricing out those people who want to send their kids to those schools.
You'll always have parents who will get tutors or whatever without necessarily going to the private sector. But that is
probably going to pay VAT on that as well.
That can't be helped. But it's an interesting discussion that you have. A lot of right-wing people who hate socialism and will want to sort of prop up a lot of failing businesses. I mean, I don't think that private schools should be obviously forced to close down, but there are some people who say that they should be given assistance to stay afloat if they can't. It goes against a kind of a market force.
They're not a failing business until the government changes the rules.
But actually, the vast majority of schools, I haven't heard of a single school actually that is going to close down because of this policy.
I can tell you some already.
Well, I think a couple of schools are closed down through unrelated means, and there might be some kids.
Alton in Hampshire, Downing Prep School in Norfolk, special educational needs closed. Both of those closed. Other schools are in jeopardy. Just let me ask you, if I may, to clarify that Chinese comment. You're essentially saying that the indigenous population in this country no longer can afford to go to the independent sector, and they're importing foreign students.
It is becoming that way. Just as the university sector, we are propping up our various aspects of the elite aspects of our education sector by importing people from abroad, and it is driving out. Because that assists the inflation I was talking about. Well, if you can charge over the odds because you've got all these foreigners with vast bank balances back home over the odds,
it's
you
not
do
just
so.
Chinese, it's Russian as well. They're Russian.
It's Russian and former Soviet Union. Starnates and things of this sort, quite a few Africans. I mean, let's be honest, I was in Dorset, small school in Dorset. The range of international students, even 50 years ago...
we had a lot of Nigerians in high school.
Even 50, we had Ethiopians, we had Ghanaians, all sorts.
Can I move on? I just want to talk about this. It's really important. Proposals to give terminally ill people in England and Wales the right to choose to end their life will be introduced in Parliament this month. This is from Kim Ledbeater, the Labour MP. Should we allow assisted dying?
Absolutely. I think it's so cruel to keep people alive against their wishes when they are suffering terribly. We should have changed this law many years ago.
Gawain?
I am very conflicted on it. I am extremely concerned. I hate the idea that a piece of legislation of such importance and such deep meaningfulness to the human condition is being rushed through. It was a promise to a TV celebrity that was never in a manifesto. There's a huge concern.
It's not the government that's doing it. It's a backbencher.
With the backing of Keir Starmer.
Look, OK, I am going to come
a promise I made to Esther.
Because I am conflicted on this. Because I do think that if I got run over tomorrow and was paraplegic, I may not want to live again and should have the right to do that. However, I have several worries. Firstly, in Canada and Holland, we have fast-tracked this law through, and we are now seeing in Canada whose statistics on the number of people that are dying assisted have gone up in the thousands. We saw a Paralympian, I've got the story here in case you told me I've made it up, a Paralympian who asked for a stair lift in Canada and was asked by the people supplying it, the government, should she not consider euthanasia first.
That's appalling. There
is a man who asked for a ramp last week in Canada and was again asked, should he not consider euthanasia. In Holland, a healthy bodily girl of 23 whose only affliction was she had some depression and some autism, has decided that she can't live with it. It's just too much, when actually what she really needs is good mental health support. She has just won the right to kill herself.
But the other
thing is, David, I've worked in a care home of people being rehabilitated, elderly people who are under terrible pressure from younger family members who are going to inherit, to shuffle off this mortal coil.
Renee, there are always going to be, and obviously the cases that you mentioned, particularly the first ones, are obviously terrible. Now, there obviously have to be safeguards. No one's saying it should be a free school.
I'm just not sure you can.
But there are always going to be ways and loopholes and everything.
I'm just going to play devil's advocate, because you and I have also had patients who have pleaded with us to say, please help me.
Conflicted over this.
And it is about safeguarding. And also, I don't want people to have to fly to Dignitas.
Exactly. That's so cruel, and they're away from their loved ones in many ways, having to die a lonely death. It's just like horrible. It's horrible.
Ethically, when you're treating someone with a terminal illness and you're treating them with opioids, there is a double-edged sword where where you're going to get to the point where you give them so many opioids to control their pain and suffering, but they may also die. And that is an ethically acceptable place. And I'm sure lots of people in cancer actually take that decision themselves.
Doesn't that also place doctors in a difficult legal position sometimes if you give a patient something to pain relief that could actually kill them?
Well, I mean, Renee's right. You titrate it according to the pain, and there are side effects on the back of that. I'm afraid I do have to bring that to a close at that point. Jonathan Liss, political commentator, Gawain Towler, Westminster Comms veteran. Thank you very much indeed. That was today's Head to Head.